All right. I'm gonna do one of these things where I talk into a microphone and you listen. Yeah, I'm just kidding. Nobody's gonna listen to this. But what I want to talk about today is tag, or the Transcendental Argument for God. Now, I have a kind of a hypothesis for why this form of apologetics is popular in our day and age, but I'm going to give that at the end. Meanwhile, I'm going to present two interesting aspects, at least two aspects that I find interesting about tag. And what I find interesting about those is that they inadvertently lead you to conclusions or to realizations that they are not supposed to lead you to. Like, they are things that are the complete opposite, I would say, of what the Christian is trying to persuade you of. Now, to just give a short introduction or a short summary of what tag is kind of like saying, look at the nature of reality and realize that only the Christian God could have ever orchestrated it in this way. And you can get really creative with tag, with all of the different little phenomena that you talk about. But I'm just going to use the most common one that people use on the internet and whatnot, and being the laws of logic, right? So it goes something like, the laws of logic exist. The laws of logic couldn't exist if the Christian God wasn't the creator of the universe. Therefore, Christianity wins. Kind of like that, right? It's never given in this formal form because it's well, tag is a kind of an indirect argument, right? It's supposed to tell you a story. It's not really supposed to give you a syllogism or anything like that. And okay, so but the interesting aspect, so the first one is that if you question this assumption, then you actually realize that, hey, wait a minute, maybe there isn't a foundation to the laws of logic. Right? Maybe we don't have a kind of get out of jail free card in form of a god that we can appeal to solve these interesting, deep, sophisticated philosophical problems, like the laws of logic, continuity of consciousness of objects in the external world, the existence of the external world, the progression of time, the distinction between us and the external world, and what else you can come up with, right? The meaning of words, of sentences, stuff like that. Like I said, you can get creative with this thing, which is a good thing. But it can, I guess, if you buy the argument, then you will become a Christian. But if you reject the argument, then you realize that you don't have a real foundation for truth, meaning, logic, and the rest of it, which is basically nihilism. And I don't think nihilism is a bad thing. I think nihilism is a perfectly reasonable thing. I mean, maybe it's not practical, and so that means that you have to build upon your nihilism, but it's an important step in understanding the nature of existence. So that's the first interesting aspect, that it can actually lead you to nihilism as well as Christianity. The second interesting thing is that it actually betrays the nature of religion. Now, there are all of these philosophers, I guess, like William Lane Craig is, I guess, the most prominent one, who pretend to argue in favor of God on a rational basis by using rationality and logic. Now, what they in fact are doing is they're lying to you, and they're pretending like they have a kind of a bottom-up approach. Like they start from, let's say, a presupposition, and they argue their way up, and they're following where truth leads them, and truth ends up leading them to the Christian God. This is what they pretend to be doing. But in reality, they are simply starting from the foregone conclusion of God exists, the Christian God exists, Christian God has these certain properties, and they are reverse engineering an argument to prove the foregone conclusion. Now, Tag is doing just that, right? It's no different from the cosmological or teleological or moral or ontological or whatever other sorts of bad arguments there are. What I'm talking about with the interesting aspect of Tag is that it betrays exactly that point, that religion just wants you to believe certain things. Like, it doesn't want you to question assumptions. It doesn't want you to come up with your own justification for the laws of logic. It just wants you to assume that God has taken care of all of these interesting philosophical problems, and then you're not supposed to question God's nature. So it takes all of these problems, ties them into a knot, and says, don't worry about them. God has taken care of it. So by pretending to do philosophy, it betrays the true nature of religion, which is just shut up and believe. Now, there is an interesting debate that you can watch on YouTube between Greg Bonson, one of the more famous pre-suppers, so people who use the tag, and a dude who, I don't know, George Stein or something, it doesn't matter what he's called. Why this debate is interesting is that Greg Bonson completely destroys his opponent. By using tag, by using the Transcendental Argument. And it is an interesting video, or I guess audio, or debate, because it shows you what can happen to you if you are not familiar with a certain type of argument, and this argument is used against you, right? So So I guess it's so I want to suggest you watch this debate because it's instructive, but I want to talk about a certain instance in that debate where Greg Bonson says something like, by showing up to the debate, the atheist already admitted defeat. And his reasoning is that, well, God accounts, like, debate presupposes logic. The only thing that can account for logic is God. Therefore, by showing up to the debate and by using logic, the atheist admits that God exists. Right? This is somewhat the idea of it. It's a good BTFO moment, right? And it plays to the crowd really well, and it's effective. And so I don't want to take anything away from that. But if you think about it, doesn't Bonson betray, by saying this, doesn't he betray that he doesn't believe that? And what I mean is that if he really believed that he won the debate from the get-go, from the outset, by this simple fact of his opponent showing up, why would he himself show up for the debate? Why wouldn't he just stay at home and watch TV or something and just send a note, well, look, since my opponent showed up to the debate, he lost. And in fact, why did Bonson decide to study philosophy and to become an apologist in the first place if his argument is that by the mere existence of God, he wins all debates by default? Why go through all that trouble in the first place, right? So it doesn't really make sense logically. It's like he's playing a game that he cannot lose by definition, right? Because it's a rigged game. I mean, would you really dedicate your life to doing that? I don't know. I guess I would kind of grow tired of it. So, he doesn't really believe what he's saying. But nevertheless, it's an interesting argument, and it is an interesting debate, and so you should check it out. But okay, my final point that I want to make is I want to present my hypothesis for why this argument is so popular in this day and age. So first of all, I think that this debate that I talked about between Bonson and Stein plays a huge part in it. That theists basically watch this debate and they think, oh, I want to pwn atheists in the name of God, just like Bonson did. And so they kind of study it and they do their own version of it. Then another reason is that it's pretty easy to do a presuppositional critique like that, to do this presuppositional apologetics, the tag. It's pretty easy. You don't have to know much about anything. You just basically have to memorize a couple of things and also have a couple of tricks up your sleeve. But the main reason is that I think that tag shows you what it looks like when a religion is in its death throes. So basically, the other types of apologetics would be like the evidentialist approach, right, where you would try to argue from the fossil record, or you would try to argue from the geological record, and I don't know, I guess invoke like the Great Flood or young Earth, something like that, something like the what are they called? Intelligent design crowd are doing, right? Are trying to do still, I guess. But they are basically dead in the water. They just don't know it yet. Or you could do like a typical philosophical approach like William Lane Craig, but those arguments are like 1,000 years old each, and they have been refuted many times, and there are no good new arguments, so this approach also is basically a lost cause. And so what Christians were forced into is this last desperate measure of just saying, well, look, by even arguing with me, you admit defeat, kind of a thing, right? So just basically a rhetorical trick, a word game. But my point, I guess what I want to end on, my overarching point, is that the sooner people realize that Christianity is basically done, and okay, let me just give the let me just insert that I don't really have a problem with people who just hold on to their religion for psychological or personal reasons. Like, if you want to pray and structure your life according to a certain religion, go ahead, more power to you. But my point is that those people who pretend to have some sort of argument or some sort of justification for religion, well, first of all, they're doing it wrong. And second of all, I wish they would stop just pretending and wasting everybody's time with their intellectual fapping. And they would be better off realizing that we have real problems, that modernity and I guess postmodernity, if you want to call it that, have real problems that need solutions, and that Christianity doesn't have anything to say about, because obviously it wasn't created with modernity in mind. And I am going to talk about these problems, right? This is a kind of a teaser, I guess, for a later time.